But you're saying though that this construction is one that could really use on anything in North America.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of what I was doing with my 270s. This is the bullet that I used in that 270.
I was like, well, if I throw a mic on, then I can help others the way that these people have all helped me.
Born in the heart of the Pennsylvania deer camp, with the help of experts, friends, and local legends, we bring you valuable knowledge and powerful stories for your hunting adventures. Welcome to the East Meets West Hunt Podcast with your host, Beau Martonik.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt Podcast. This is the Gear Talk edition, and normally I'm doing these short 10 to 20 minute episodes on a specific gear item by myself, but once again here I brought my brother, Kurt Martonik, otherwise known as Kurt the Gunsmith, in here to be able to help out with it. So Kurt is obviously a trained gunsmith and went to school for it, the Colorado School of Trades, and knows just about everything when it comes to firearms, which is definitely a weakness of mine. So typically when it comes down to hunting rifles, scopes, bullet selection, all those different things, I rely on Kurt there. And he's also got a website, it's kurtthegunsmith.com.
Yeah.
And then his YouTube channel, The Gunsmithing Journal, or just Gunsmithing Journal, with a lot of additional resources to be able to learn more about gunsmithing, firearms, bullet selection, all those different things. But today you wanted to talk about, which I thought was a really good topic, about bullet selection. And one of the things that I know you always kind of get not worked up with me about, but I'll ask you like, oh, what caliber should I get? Or you see it all the time on the internet. What caliber should you get for hunting, whether it's deer, elk, all those different things? And you've stressed to me many times that it's more important of the actual bullet than it is the actual caliber. So do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So what, like, it's constantly everybody's what's the best caliber for this? What's the best caliber for that? And it's like, you can really make any caliber, not any caliber, but one caliber do much more than the average person does just by choosing the right bullet and the right bullet construction. And it's a whole rabbit hole to dive into, but it's well worth it, because I find a lot of people buying, like, they want to take their whatever rifle elk hunting, and then they're like, oh, well, maybe I need to buy a different rifle or a different caliber. And it's like, no, you just need to change up your ammunition. And even more common is I see a lot of people hitting the whitetail woods using the wrong bullets, like, and they're wondering, and then they blame it on the caliber. Like, you constantly hear it with 6.5 Creedmoor. Like, 6.5 Creedmoor doesn't kill very well. It's like, there's a good chance you're just not using the right bullet for that caliber. So
is there a point though, as far as like with the actual caliber, where it does matter for something like an elk or a moose or anything like that?
I mean, absolutely. There's like bullet diameters and stuff like that for sure, but like if you're talking medium range, like say like a 30-06, that was forever. That was the caliber for everybody. And because you can do so much with it, you can kill grizzly bears with it. Or Jack O'Connor, he's killed almost everything with a 270. And today, the 270 almost never gets mentioned for elk even, you know?
Yeah.
And it's some stuff like that. And that was back when bullet technology wasn't near what it is today. So
yeah, we're
seeing a lot of developments in the technology to make bullets, and it's really kind of, we're in the heyday right now of like the best availability of stuff.
Yeah. I think. Well, I mean, and you've kind of used it, I don't know if it was to prove a point, but more so because you wanted to, but your 270 you have built over there, you've used that for what? What have you shot with that gun?
So this is a 270 that I built myself off of an old German Mauser action. It's a G3340 for the people that know what that is. It's a 270, but I've used it to kill, I don't know numbers, lots of antelope, a few deer, elk,
sheep.
My sheep, yeah. So I've used it for all kinds of stuff, right? And I'm gonna take it for moose next year. And it is kind of to prove a point a little bit, but it's also just to kind of build a story with one rifle, because I like hand-me-down stuff and kind of
Yeah,
I don't know.
And you built that stock all by hand too.
Yeah,
right?
I did, and I did all the metal work too, all the barrel and soldered on the sights and everything like that. So this is all did all the work on this one. But yeah, and it's 270, and partially it was because of Jack O'Connor that made me want to explore that caliber and see what could be done with it.
Yeah.
And actually, largely, I've done it with just one bullet too for all of it.
Really, what bullet was that?
Barnes TTSX. So Barnes tipped TTSX, and that is a solid copper, which we'll get into here in a bit.
All right, so how do you want to kind of start this and rolling in and talking about some of this stuff with the bullet selection?
So first, I'll say we'll explain the different types of bullets that are on the market today, and like their construction, right? Because it's not necessarily, and we're gonna try to keep brand out of it. I'll mention it, but I mean, and there's no one brand that's just head and shoulders above another. All of them are great right now. But I might say stuff like I'm going to be talking about Partition style bullets, and that's a Nosler trademark name, but almost or a good amount of the other bullet manufacturers have similar bullets. They're just called something different. So, but first and foremost, we went from lead bullets, solid lead bullets, which still work, but back then you had to have a really heavy bullet, and that was how you got killing power, right? You got a lot of penetration. Think 45-70s shooting buffalo. Like that's when I shot my bison, I had like 4 foot of penetration with that. And but the bullet didn't expand or anything like that. It was just a solid lead bullet. But once we started getting into high velocity, lead starts to melt and leads up barrels and all that. So they had to figure out a way for that. And then they put a copper base on the back of that lead bullet so it wouldn't melt the back of the bullet. But still, it was moving too fast and it wasn't keeping, holding shape, all that kind of stuff. So the first evolution of like the modern day bullet is called a cup and core. And essentially what they did is they took a copper cup, they stuck a lead core down in it, and then closed the copper cup over the top of it. And that's like your, there's not a lot of the varmint bullets today are in that style, because those are made to, like, since that copper and that lead isn't bonded other than just that kind of the shape of the bullet, when it hits something, it's very explosive. You'll see that lead separate from that copper jacket. So yeah, one thing that happened there is eventually they saw that, okay, it's great. Like deer are they're very easy to kill. We'll consider them light skinned game, right? We have light skin, medium skin, and then like the heavier stuff, like dangerous game. So it worked great on deer, but when you moved up to like elk, you just weren't getting the penetration. Like say you hit a bone, that bullet would blow up. Maybe it hit vitals, maybe not. So they moved on to what most common one called today is the interlock, the Hornady interlock. And that's basically same cup and core, but they put a cantilever around it. And that serves to hold that lead in place better.
Okay.
So the longer you can hold that weight, because everybody likes to talk about ballistics and how much better this ballistic coefficient is and that. And it's like, well, that doesn't really matter until you get past 300 yards. And the majority of people shooting in the East aren't shooting that far. There's exceptions, but the people that are doing that, they have the knowledge to. So like, don't get bent out of shape about ballistic coefficient if you're hunting whitetail in a clear cut. But I guess where I was going with that. So now everybody thinks of external ballistics, but nobody's really focusing on what is that bullet doing once it hits the animal, like its performance after it hits the animal, because that's important, right? And all of this can be alleviated with a perfect shot, but we know that doesn't always happen. Mm-hmm. And this is also the hardest part to test, right? You can take ballistics gel, but it's just not the same as actually putting it into an animal and seeing. And everything can react different, whether you hit a rib or you hit a shoulder, something like that. So anyways, that cantilever held that in, and then you have that's your interlock style. Next, you go to a bonded style. So a bonded style bullet that's like your Nosler AccuBond. So that's where that bond part comes in.
That's like the ones I use for whitetails.
Yep. So that's what you're using for whitetails. And honestly, that could be a little overkill for whitetail as far as like construction wise. That's made to hold weight longer, and it's the same as like anything, right? If you drop a metal bar on the ground into a pile of sand, it's going to penetrate a lot deeper than you drop in a foam tube of the same size, you know? So holding that weight longer means more penetration. That lead is bonded to the copper. So essentially becomes one piece. And I guess now's a good time to say, why are we still using lead? Like, why did we get past that at this point? Well, lead is still the most dense material you can get. So to get something heavy enough to do what we need it to do, we still need lead as part of the equation. And you'll see with the downsides of that and the upsides of not having lead when I get into the solid coppers. But we still need lead largely. There's nothing that does it better than lead right now. So next, the Partition. And the Partition is kind of legendary because it was the first of its kind. And it started the famous story of Nosler, the guy who founded the Nosler company. He was up hunting moose in Canada. He was using like an old cup and core style bullet. Shot a moose that was mud caked, and that bullet, he shot it a bunch of times and it barely wasn't penetrating. Like it was blowing up basically on that caked moose, peppering the shoulder, not getting into vitals. So he's like, how can I make these bullets stay together and hold their weight to punch through that like hard shell? And he came up with a Partition style bullet, which is, it's like a cup and core almost on the top, but then there's another chamber on the bottom that's filled with lead. So that part on the bottom stays together the whole time, holds that weight the whole time, and that top mushrooms and deforms. So I shot a whitetail last year with a Nosler Partition, my 270, and it was like clean pass through. The lungs were completely destroyed, but I mean, I had zero meat damage. It was like exactly what I wanted. Because like one of the things with those old cup and core style, all those fragments, you can get lead and stuff in the meat, right? So holding a bullet together is important to some people. So that's the Partition style bullet. Still, it was invented, I think, in the 50s, might have been late 40s, but still super applicable today. Actually, that's what I have.
Yeah, I want to show an example of that.
I have loaded up here. It just looks like typical. I mean, everybody likes to say, oh, that's a soft point. Soft point means lead exposed. That has no, I mean, it has a little bit to do with construction, but it doesn't, like, that looks the same as a cup and core, you know?
Yeah.
And that lead tip is exposed so that when it hits, it expands that copper, right? And plastic tips do the same thing. So going past partitions, we're going to go to solids. So there's two types of solids. There's expanding, and then there's just like kind of your dangerous game solids. And those dangerous game solids are just strictly for penetration. That's like you want to punch through a Cape Buffalo from front to back type of stuff. I like the Barnes TDSX for solids. And I don't use, like, I'm not trying to save the environment using solid coppers. They just work really, really well for me. And there's a lot of downsides to solid copper, right? You don't get as much ballistic coefficient because, again, there's no lead, and lead's a lot denser than copper. So the bullet is so much longer than it needs to be for the weight compared to a lead bullet of the same weight.
Okay, so that's what, when you're saying the ballistic coefficient, explain that a little bit.
So ballistic coefficient is basically an equation that mixes weight, velocity, or not, it doesn't do velocity, it's just strictly a measurement of the bullet. So a lot of weight, aerodynamics, all that kind of stuff. But the heavier your bullet is, the more ballistic efficient it is. Same thing with like the lead pipe and the foam, right? If you're dropping it off a skyscraper, what's going to hold its velocity? Or like what's going to stay on track better? Or say you shot it out of a cannon, which one's going to fly level or more level? But solid coppers, you don't have as high of a ballistic coefficient. But again, most of the time it's not a factor unless you're shooting 300 plus yards. And even then, it's just making a little bit more adjustment. Benefits of solid copper, especially these Barnes. And I keep talking about these ones because I've shot like 10 or 12 animals with them. And I have had not one bad experience with them. And I've had them good and bad. Solid coppers tend to stick together and hold their weight. I shot a mule deer one time. I actually hit it a little high. It was a steep angle. It went right through the spine, like the thickest part of the spine. And I went up there a week after the fact with a metal detector, found the bullet in the dirt, and it held 99% of its weight. So it's like, that tells me that no fragments are anywhere in the meat. The other thing, you usually lose the plastic tip is about all in this, but penetration is phenomenal. Out of those 10 or 12 animals I've shot with these, I have had not one bullet stay in the animal. All of them have been clean pass-throughs. And what does a pass-through mean? Like, so there's two trains of thought to that. Some people will say you don't want your bullet to pass through because you want it to use all of its energy in that animal, right? Because then your maximum killing power, right? The other side of that is, you and I both know with elk especially, and this happens in the archery world a lot, if you don't get a pass through and say it's a higher shot, his body cavity could fill up with blood and you might not get a blood trail at all.
Yeah.
So having a pass through, more likely to get a good blood trail, all that kind of stuff. It's two places for it to bleed.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing as archery with wanting the pass throughs because you have 2 holes where you can blood trail versus just one.
So personally, like if I was like when I hunt elk, I will never do anything that I don't think is going to pass through because I know how tough elk are and they can run for miles. Even if you make a good shot, you might not get a good blood trail and might lose that elk because you can't find it.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like the solid coppers, but they've almost become this is my own term, ballistically boring to me. As far as like, they're not interesting for me to do post-analysis of deer and stuff that I've killed. So that's why I'm messing around with other bullets now to see.
But you're saying though that this construction is one that the solid coppers you could really use on anything in North America.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of what I was doing with my 270s. This is the bullet that I used in that 270. Punch through elk, punch through. And I was actually turned on to these by a buddy of mine's buddy who has killed way more elk than probably most people. And he does it with a, I think it's a 284 Winchester and using solid copper. So that's like, some people would consider that's a little undergunned. And he's like, I've never had a bullet recovered in an elk. And he's like, I've shot him up to 350 yards, like pass-throughs, all that. So I'm like, I listen to the people that are like, this isn't just me doing this. I listen to the people that know better than I do on this stuff. And he couldn't speak highly enough about him. So I moved into that as well. But now, only reason I'm moving away from him is I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Like the experiment.
I mean, that's what you had me using for moose when I was up there. Obviously, I didn't get to test it out, not find a legal bull, but that's what you had moved me to. And I'd used them in the past on whitetail, and I think my bear in Montana, I was using those.
Yep. And you also, with these solid coppers, you can tend to go a lighter bullet weight than what you're usually using and get the same results. So because they're holding their weight, like I'm thinking about trying 110 grains in my 270. So I'll get a little more velocity and I'll shoot flatter, but I'm still going to get pass-throughs and I'm still going to get good ballistics. I'm trying to think of the term used, like once you get in the animal, those ballistics. But yeah, so I can't speak highly enough about them.
So why would someone want to use something different? Like what are the arguments against them? Are there arguments against them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. One, you don't have like the shock as you would say, like with a bullet that again releases all of its energy in that animal.
Yep.
Right. And actually, that leads us perfectly into match bullets, which I'll get into in a second.
Yeah.
So this is, some people don't like that. Again, they're not as ballistically efficient because they don't have any lead in them. They're not heavier. But yeah, a lot of people, they get a bad rap because it's the environmental movement's trying to force everybody to use them. And it's like, so that's where a lot of that comes from. But if you set all the politics aside, they are a good bullet.
Okay.
So we'll move to match bullets now. And so this is another topic of mine that I get pretty not heated over, but match bullets are designed to hit targets and blow up and reduce ricochets, reduce bullets flying off into the air, hit steel plates and completely get destroyed, stuff like that. How they do that is they are a standard, like they're your cup and core style. So they might be bonded. I would have to look. I'm sure every company is a little bit different. But how they blow up easily is they use a super thin copper jacket compared to hunting bullets. So the thicker copper jacket, the more velocity it needs to expand, the slower it's gonna expand, right? So this thin jacket basically makes it so that when it hits a target, it's just starting, it's exploding in a sense. Downside of this, right, is if you hit a bone, it's unpredictable, right? But I mean, you can see people, I know people that shoot elk that swear by them. And that's when you see those shots on TV where it's like that elk just drops, right? But again,
The shot placement.
Shot placement, yeah.
This really sounds like the same argument as fixed versus expandables and in the whitetail woods, where you're like, a fixed blade is going to, you have the best penetration, the best chance of having 2 holes going through it. You hit bone, you have a better chance of going through it. Where expandables, better blood trails, usually, it's, if you make a good shot or maybe you hit back, it's, better in that situations. But if you hit certain things, like you hit a rib on, an angle, you don't know where it's going to deflect or it might not go through. Similar, it sounds like.
Yeah, and so like, speaking to that thinner jacket too, that's why you'll see on match bullets, like the same size bullet in a hunting bullet might be in 6.5 Creedmoor sense 143 grain, and you go to a match grade and you're 147 grain for the same size bullet. That thinner jacket, there's more lead involved, so a little more density, heavier bullet. Yeah, a lot of people swear by these. I'm not saying don't use them. I'm just saying they can be unpredictable. For whitetail, yeah, they're gonna be fine, but you'll probably get a lot of meat damage, and you'll probably get like opposite shoulder peppered with fragments. And meat damage to me was, I take that seriously, because I like to, especially like if you're shooting a doe, you don't want to lose a whole shoulder because
and you don't want to anyways, like just being able to maintain the best yield of meat that you possibly can.
Absolutely. And that so I definitely, again, I know people that use them for elk, but you got to go up in caliber pretty heavily. Like, don't go into the elk woods with a 6.5 Creedmoor and match bullets, because that's probably not going to work out well for you, right? So now that we went through all the different constructions, there's different things that you need to consider as well. And one of them is velocity. And a lot of people think velocity as in like muzzle velocity. Well, yeah, that plays into it, but more you're talking about performance velocity for these bullets, right? So we have these Hornady Precision Hunter bullets, ELDX, extremely low drag. So that is a long range hunting bullet. What does that tell me, knowing hunting bullets and like bullet construction, is this bullet is designed to expand at lower velocities than the typical hunting bullet, because your velocity is dropping off the farther distance you go, right? So if you're shooting, say, a mule deer at 500-600 yards, this bullet is made to perform at those velocities at 500 and 600 yards. And most companies will actually tell you, yeah, if you look on the back of the box, it'll show you what your performance is. And that isn't your muzzle velocity that you're looking at. You're looking at that as your impact velocity.
Okay.
So when you look at a ballistics chart, you're going to go down and say, okay, it's 400 yards I'm going to shoot or whatever, and you can see what the velocity is going to be, and then you can kind of have an idea of what your bullet's going to do. And like some of the new rangefinders that have ballistics built into them, they'll actually tell you your muzzle velocity at that distance for your input rifle, and that kind of helps out with that. But again, sometimes people will get misconceptions about certain calibers. 6.5 Creedmoor, I like to pick on it because I like the caliber and most people don't. But they'll say like, oh, I used it on whitetail, it just didn't do good. It's like, you probably, like, 6.5s have been around since the 1890s and have been known as one of the most effective calibers out there. Like, you're using the wrong bullet. If you're using a long range hunting bullet and you're shooting less than, say, 50 yards, that bullet isn't going to perform how it's designed to perform, because you might be above that velocity threshold. Like, I mean, if you look at this box, you see at 2,600 feet per second, it's a lot more destroyed than 1,800 feet per second.
Yeah.
So what would that do at 3,000? If you're that high and you're shooting at near muzzle velocity, that might break apart, and yeah, it might kill the animal, but you might get a lot of meat damage, you might get fragments all over the place. So this is a good idea where it's like to follow the marketing, as bad as that sounds, but like on the box of your ammunition, and I brought Hornady out just because they do a really good job of this, but like Precision Hunter, that's long range hunting, that's using a bullet that's made to expand at those lower velocities. You go to their American Whitetail brand, and that is a bullet that is made to expand at, like, dump all of its energy in a light skin game, right? If you shot an elk with this, you might kill it, but don't expect to pass through. Or like, don't expect it to even hit the opposite shoulder. It might, but it might not. Like, there's just, again, you can't control everything, but it's just a theory and stuff. So if you're a reloader, you get really into this stuff, and you can tailor your loads to everything, but you don't have to be. Like, just go through those different companies' websites and figure out what the optimal ammunition is for that. Like, I have a whole stack of reloading manuals here, and whatever brand you're going to reload for, or even if you just want to shoot, like say you're going to shoot Nosler branded ammunition, these first few pages in the book go over all the bullet construction for each bullet that you're looking at. It'll tell you what your optimal velocities are. It'll tell you all that kind of stuff. And it's just really good information.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's highly, highly recommend. Even if you don't reload a reloading manual, you can learn a lot from.
Okay. And before I transition to another topic, do you have anything else on the actual bullets or the constructions that you want to bring up before I go into that?
No, I think that was a good overview.
Okay. So now going back to, you said caliber doesn't matter as much, but what are some things to consider when you are choosing a caliber?
Versatility. And what I'll say with that is, like, you have a lot of the new calibers coming out, and there is some fluff involved with new calibers, right? And you'll see people say, "Oh, it's just this caliber," but like they're just rebranding this caliber, and it's like, no, that's not true. We're coming to a point where we're getting the technology in making bullets is so historically all arms evolution has followed the ammunition, and bullets are part of that. We're hitting a point where we figured out how to make extremely efficient bullets and heavy bullets heavy for caliber bullets, I'll say, right? And your twist rate on your rifling of your rifle is what stabilizes those bullets. So like you can't shoot if they made one, you couldn't shoot a, say, 40 grain bullet in that. It just wouldn't stabilize correctly. You wouldn't be able to shoot it accurately. So there's a certain range on different twist rates. What they're doing with new calibers is with these new super long range bullets, they need a different twist rate. So yeah, they might look like they operate similarly to something that already exists, but they don't really, because what already exists can't handle those new weights, those new twist rates. But where I'm getting at with that is, like, say you wanted to get a 6.5 PRC. That's a great caliber if you're shooting long range stuff. But if you're hunting in the whitetail woods, you're kind of limiting yourself to what bullets are available, and also like you're in that high weight class. Yeah, it'll do the job, but there's probably better options and more versatile options. Like, again, I'll go back to my 270 as like I can tune it down to a 100 grain bullet and shoot coyotes with it, or I can shoot elk and moose with it. So finding something that's versatile, and calibers that I like that are super versatile, or 300 Win Mag is hard to beat, right? 300 PRC is in my opinion, you get a little bit more velocity and everything. That is a better long range cartridge in the 30 calibers because it can handle those super heavy bullets. But this has so much versatility where you can kill a whitetail with it and not be complete overkill with it, or you can take it for moose and elk and all that. Like, to me, yeah, I think everybody, like, if you had to pick 2 centerfire rifles to have and cover all big game in North America, it would probably be a 270 or 30-06 and then a 300 Win Mag. Then you could cover everything and just change your bullet for what you're going after.
Well, and something that you brought up to me when I was first choosing, I wanted I had a 270 Winchester short mag, and I had some other, smaller caliber rifles, but I wanted something that could take down a moose and go through that. And I was considering what I wanted to go with. And you had talked to me about the 300 Win Mag, and you're like, that's also you can buy a box of shells probably at a gas station somewhere, and you can find it anywhere, where other calibers, even though 300 PRC, you're not going to find that everywhere. Yeah,
it's becoming, a lot of those are becoming more prevalent, but 20 years from now, will the sexiness wear off, and will it be on the shelves? And I like all calibers, to be honest. Like, I'm not but I mean, if you're only getting a couple, that's what.
Yeah, if you're trying to get the best bang for your buck with it. No,
and
that makes
300 Win Mag's like one of the least sexy. Same with 30-06. They're like one of the least sexy guns anymore. 6.5 Creedmoor's another one, but they're like one of the least sexy calibers.
Yeah,
because they're not new, they're not super fast, but they do the job, especially of the right bullet.
Well, so that's basically, so I have like 2 rifles that I basically use for most everything, across North America. My deer rifle now is a 308.
Another great caliber. Yeah.
And that was, again, something you told me. So I have I think I have it here. That's in my truck, but I have the CVA Cascade XT in that, which is a 22-inch barrel short. I wanted something maneuverable to be able to move around. And then for Western big game stuff. I wanted a little bit longer barrel so I could lay out. I put the bigger scope on it. So I got the Cascade range. I have the RS 1.2 from Maven on there, that scope, so I can dial it in. But I don't need all that stuff in the whitetail space. So for me, it was like 2 guns can kind of really do most of the things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think everybody fantasizes about having 1 gun to do it all, but it's like, it is feasible, and that's what I'm kind of trying to prove with my 270, but I'll never only want 1 gun. Like, I'm always going to have more than that for sure.
Yeah.
But
and I do like the aspect of, say, like the 300 Win Mag, I have a lot of ammunition for it.
Yeah.
It's, I can stock up on it, have it. It's relatively affordable compared to some of those other.
Yeah, and also, like, learning, they always say, like, fear the man with 1 gun, right? Because he knows it so well. And if you read those old, like, Elmer Keith and Jack O'Connor and those old outdoor writers, they would have, like, when they'd go on a Canadian expedition back then, like, they'd go hunt for a month and have tags for everything. They took, like, 1 or 2 guns, usually in the same caliber, and they had reloads built up. Like, they had grouse loads that would shoot super light bullets at, like, subsonic velocities that hit the same point of impact as their high power loads. And they had loads for this, and it was like, they knew their rifle so well that it was like, and that's something to envy now, like,
yeah, it is,
knowing your piece of gear that well.
Yeah, no, it's always the flashy stuff that gets attention, and we all like it. We're
love flashy stuff,
gearheads with it, and want all that stuff. But honestly, I learned that I didn't learn this up there, but it was one thing when I was up in Alberta. Hunting with Jim Hull Jr. up there. He's like, I know the real killers that come up here with their bows that are all worn in, and like, it's just like, okay, they know their equipment well. You can obviously know your equipment with newer stuff if you practice a lot, but it's just there's something to be said about getting equipment and just knowing it like the back of your hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and I guess I'll have one last thing to say with on bullet construction. So a lot of the information that I talked about today was input into Spartan Forge Cyber Scout. Like, I input that stuff. So if you're going on a hunt and you want to help choose a bullet, you can literally go in there and ask it and say, hey, I'm going on an antelope hunt. This is my caliber. What would be a good option for bullet weight, size, and all that? And so that's a good thing there.
So on Spartan Forge Cyber Scout, you basically got Kurt in your pocket or on your computer, so you can ask it all the questions and be able to get pretty dang good answers on it.
Yeah, like reasonable answers, not trying to sell you anything.
Answers. Yeah. Yep. Cool. Well, let's end this episode here. Anything else you want to add there, Kurt?
No, I think we pretty much got it covered.
All right.
Ask any questions in the comments, and I'll try to look at them, I guess.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Check out more Kurt stuff at Kurt the Gunsmith on Instagram. Subscribe over on his email list there on his website, kurtthegunsmith.com, and then Gunsmithing Journal on YouTube. Again, appreciate everybody listening. If you like the channel, like the show here, please subscribe, share it with your friends. That helps out so much.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, share it with your buddies. Leave us a rating, a review, and subscribe. If you want to check out more content like this, there's plenty in the links below. We truly appreciate having you guys along with us.